Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Leeper. I'm the City Councilor for Kitchissippi Ward. This is the Heritage Gas Station, the Champlain Oil building that's at the corner of Richmond and Island Park. This has been in discussion for quite some time, obviously. The building is designated heritage. The proponents are going to take us through their application for a rezoning that would allow them to build the building that they're going to show us. And I don't have any sort of introductory remarks on this one. I am really interested in working with the community to come up with the right approach on this one. Community feedback as well. So tonight I'm listening a lot. I don't have a lot to assert. But Fiona, why don't you take us through how it'll run?
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks everyone for joining tonight. So I'm sure a lot of you have done these development webinars with us before, so apologies if this is a little redundant, but I always like to run through how everything's going to work for those who are just joining us for the first time. So you notice we're on the webinar format. You are muted and you don't have video access. The main way that you can communicate with us tonight is through the Q&A function. So at the bottom of your screen, if you're on a desktop, there should be a Q&A icon. You can type questions into there. We already have one right now. It says, "Hey Fiona, are we muted?" So as I go through the Q&A, I'll click answer live. You should see that question pop up now. One of the panelists will answer it, and then I'll click done, and then the question moves on. And as we go through the Q&A, I will read out what's coming up in order, but also I'm gonna look for individual questions. So if like 3 or 4 people ask about the Island Park and Richmond Road intersection, I'll either lump those 3 together or read the first one and not read the repeated ones because we've already answered that for the sake of time. So how tonight's going to proceed is very shortly the applicant is going to introduce their team, run through a high-level presentation. To just add to what Jeff says, to refresh everyone's memory, the last time we discussed this application was in May 2019, which I'm sure seems like a lifetime ago to so many of us. Where Trinity showed us the 3 different concept options. They took some time to evaluate what they wanted to do, and now they've come forward with a proposal for a 9-story option with 60 units that sees the retention of the heritage building but moved on the site, and they're going to get into all that in much more detail very shortly. So after their presentation, we'll move into the Q&A. As I mentioned, anytime during the presentation, you can input your question into the Q&A. I'll get to it during the Q&A, so don't worry about that. We'll go through the Q&A. This is also being recorded, so if any of your neighbors or community members aren't able to attend tonight, it's going to go on YouTube by Friday or so. You can email us and I can send you the link, or you can check our YouTube channel, which is just Kitchissippi Ward on YouTube. You Google it, it should be easily found. We do also have here with us tonight Jean-Charles, who is the lead city planner on the file. So since the application has been submitted, what you're going to want to do after this meeting is follow it up with official comments and feedback, both to JC as well as to our office. I'll type his email address into the chat momentarily so you have that on hand. Once you email your formal feedback, you'll also be part of JC's like update distribution list. So as this file progresses, if changes are made, whenever it's going to come to planning committee, you'll get notification of that through JC, but obviously as well, we will communicate updates on the file through our newsletter and our emails as well. We also have with us with the city, Ashley, and she's the heritage component. So because this involves the retention of the heritage gas station, obviously heritage is paying close attention. So I do see a hand raised. We're not moving forward with hands raised tonight. Maybe it was just an accident, but if you do have a question or comment, and put it into the Q&A, and we'll get to it as soon as we open the Q&A function. So with that, I am turning it over to Cameron with Trinity.
Thank you, Fiona. And good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. My name is Aaron Cameron. I am the Director of Development at Trinity and am responsible for this file. As Fiona mentioned, we held a pre-application community consultation meeting in the summer of last year where we presented 3 concept designs to get feedback. Based on the feedback from the community and the local councillor and our own aspirations for the site, we ultimately decided to move forward with a 9-story plan. Sorry if my cat's getting in the way here. With heritage preservation that we will be presenting to you tonight. Making the presentation will be Riel LaBelle from Hoban Architecture, who will cover the design elements. We also have Paul Black from FOTEN, who will discuss the planning and policy framework for the site and area. And once they finish the presentation, we'll come back for Q&A. And we also have Andrew Hart, who is our traffic consultant, and myself, who will be answering questions during that period. So on that note, I will hand it over to you, Paul.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks everyone for being here. You should be able to see my screen now. And so, as has been mentioned, we're here tonight to talk about the southwest corner of Richmond Road and Island Park Drive, which is the Champlain oil gas station, the heritage gas station, which has been on the site for many years, and we're excited to present our plans for the site tonight. Just starting off with a little bit of site context, you can see here, just looking north, south, east, and west, our site is looking north along Island Park Drive. Our site is at the southwest corner, as mentioned. Looking east, you can see the Mizrahi site, which is here. Obviously, in this area, not under construction yet, but as we know, is now under construction. And that's a 12-story residential mixed-use building with retail at grade. Looking west, you can see our site here in the foreground, and the Ashcroft buildings further to the west, beyond Leighton Terrace. And you can see the northwest corner of Richmond and Island Park, which is also a used car lot gas station site. And then finally, looking south, you can see the Esso gas station on the southeast corner of the intersection, and Island Park Drive continuing south. Just a little bit more specifically, our site does frame the corner of the street. It is set back a fair ways from the existing street edge, and it does extend about halfway across the block between Island Park and Leighton Terrace. There is a public laneway, which we'll discuss in a few minutes as we get into the design, that runs between the subject property and the former car dealership to the west, adjacent to Leighton Terrace. In terms of just a high-level overview of the development, Real is going to get into quite a bit more detail later on in the presentation, but the proposal is a 9-story development containing 60 residential units, as Fiona mentioned. There's around 360 square meters of retail space proposed at grade, which includes within the retained heritage gas station and wrapping around onto Island Park Drive. There are 37 vehicular parking spaces proposed in 2 levels of underground parking. And the underground parking and loading is all from the west facade of the building and from that public laneway, as I mentioned. So we've set our building back to provide a 6-meter access way that will serve both for vehicular access as well as moving trucks, garbage trucks, all of that sort of service use. And then finally, there are 32 bike parking spaces proposed within the parking garage as well. The landscape plan for the site includes improvements along both Richmond Road and Island Park Drive, and a landscape feature at the corner of Richmond and Island Park, which Real will get into a little bit later. In terms of just a high-level overview of the policy context for this development, the site is designated traditional Main Street in the official plan. The traditional Main Street designation encourages mixed-use, compact, pedestrian-oriented development. It is a target area for intensification in the city's official plan, and it permits generally mid-rise building heights up to a maximum of 9 stories. The property is also zoned traditional Main Street and has a site-specific, or not site-specific, but an area-specific exception, 83, which permits auto-related uses at the corner, on corner sites, I should say. The maximum height permitted on this site currently is 15 meters. So the proposed uses of residential apartments or condos and retail space are both permitted uses in the current zone, traditional Main Street zone, but we have submitted a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment application to address the building height, some setbacks and projections above the permitted height limit. The property is also within the Richmond Road Westboro secondary plan and CDP areas. The site is on this map located in the far right-hand corner at the corner of Island Park and Richmond. So it is within the traditional Main Street, and its residential infill and redevelopment is encouraged along this stretch. Generally, building heights are in the range of 4 to 6 stories. As you can see on this map, the subject site is designated for 4 stories currently in the secondary plan. The secondary plan does make specific provision for where greater heights may be appropriate. And those are listed here. So where height conforms to the prevailing heights in the area or provides a transition between heights, where the site is a community focus or a gateway location. This site is given its location and entry into Westboro. It incorporates community benefits that enhance the Main Street. Again, the site's retaining the heritage building, which contributes to that Main Street feel, and where the design policies and objectives of the official plan are met. So those are contained in section 251 and 411 of the official plan. 251 containing broad design objectives, where 411 contains more design criteria policies. And so we've looked at each of those. A site-specific official plan amendment has been submitted to amend the schedule of the secondary plan to permit the proposed 9-story height and to address depth of lot policy, which also is contained in the official plan regarding taller buildings. At this point, I'll pass it over to Rael, who's going to continue on with the presentation.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Councillor Leeper and Josh Howell. Nice to see you again. It's been a while, and thanks everyone for joining us this evening. And I'll be brief with my presentation, and hope to take a little bit more time to listen to what you all have to say about this proposal, and to engage in a more in more of a conversation together. So if you go zip through page 9, Paul, that'd be great. You know, we have been working on this proposal for quite some time now, and most of you recall we had come forward with a 7-story, 8-story, and a 9-story development proposal, and all of which I believe was the only proposal we were able to retain the heritage garage and the heritage building was in fact the 8 and 9-story, and that was to the benefit of the greater community. I think was to really reach out and make sure that we were able to attain that heritage preservation. So just to start off, there was some key design themes that I want us to focus on for the conversation, and that's really about heritage preservation, the public realm, the site access, as well as the street animation and pedestrian experience. And then we'll get into the building form. So if you can go to the next slide. You're all familiar with the current position of the Champlain oil gas station, and it sits way back onto the site, and we are essentially going to preserve it. We're going to dismantle the 2 garage bays and position the garage temporarily within the public laneway, and then reposition once the excavation is completed and we're back at grade. We'll reposition the garage closer to the intersection and more better connected with the public realm at the corner of Richmond and Island Park. And then we'll reconstruct those 2 service bays along with this. So if you go to the next slide. So this shows basically a focal point at the corner of Richmond and Island Park. We've designed the building in an L-shaped configuration in order to preserve and enhance the open the openness at the corner of Richmond and Island Park. So we have a feature landscape space with a bench, and it essentially opens up into a courtyard space that is framed by the existing Champlain oil gas station, where we will eventually get into a retail program that will animate the ground level plane. So if you go to the next slide, this aerial view really gives you a good idea of the space that exists between the curb and the building footprint. Again, the emphasis here is really to try and preserve as much of the open corner as possible, and enhance that public realm experience, and really provide a comfortable pedestrian experience along that edge condition. If you all remember, this was actually long ago. There was a traffic circle at the center here, which is why now today we take advantage of all of this open space at the corner, because, as you know, we are now looking at a traditional intersection where the sidewalks now extend to the original street edge, and we take advantage of the expanse of space between the property line and the street curb. So there's an image at the bottom left corner there of our project over at 1140 Wellington, just on Rosemount, and where the Stella Luna Cafe is positioned to take advantage of that southwest orientation with the open public space in front of the Bethany Hope building. And in essence, this will be a very similar condition with the enhanced public realm at the corner. If you flip to the next slide. So again, the two precedent images of that project that I was just describing at 1140 Wellington, and our project on the left with the preservation of the heritage garage. And again, the emphasis on the material change for the ground plane, and really creating, framing that garage with a single story podium. We're essentially boosting the heights to accommodate the full heights of the garage, the existing garage, so that we can bring it into the building and actually engage with a contiguous retail space at the ground level. Next slide. The beauty of this, I think one of the biggest assets of this project has been that public laneway, where we can remove any unsightly garage doors or loading spaces from the street and pull it into the site, and really have a back of house component to the building. So in this case, waste management, move in, move out, parking garage access is all managed through this public laneway access. And you can get both the images on the left is a view looking at the building coming from the west and getting a glimpse of that side yard condition. And then if you can imagine that eventually when the auto site becomes developed, that will be completely concealed, and a continuous streetscape will be formed with that street wall. So next slide. So building form, we talked about, I mean, this is a 9-story building. I talked about the L-shaped configuration in order to preserve the open space at the corner, and you can get a glimpse of that on the left side, the left image with the open corner. The step backs, this building is articulated, the overall building mass is broken down with step backs at the 5th floor and the 7th floor, both on Island Park and on Richmond. But more importantly, on Island Park, we've created that step back, a module that's 4 stories, which allows this thing to actually have a scale on that eastern facade that relates to the lower scale along Richmond Road, or along Island Park, sorry. So, and then we have our continuous podium, which extends from Island Park around to Richmond, and the cornerstone being that our heritage, the Champlain gas station. And then on Richmond, on the right-hand side image, you can see again, the same transition exists on the traditional Main Street. I think that pretty well sums it up. If you want to go to the next slide. I'd like to just finish by summarizing overall that we mentioned 60 units. There's below grade, we've got 2 parking levels. And within those parking levels, P1, we have 17 parking spaces. And within the second level, we have 20 parking spaces, a total of 37 parking spaces. So we're not boosting the parking capacity here. We're really just meeting the minimum of 0.5 rate, the 0.5 rate for residential parking and the 0.1 visitor parking rate. So that basically summarizes into 32 parking spaces for residential and 5 parking spaces for visitors. So I welcome you to provide us with your feedback, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. So we have only 2 questions in the queue right now. So if you've been thinking about something, now is definitely the time to put it in the Q&A, and I'll start going through them. So first 2 questions are about the public laneway. You keep referring to a public laneway, but aren't you actually proposing a private driveway?
So I can start and then hand it over to Andrew. As far as ownership is concerned, we don't own the laneway. It is in fact owned by the city. However, we are proposing to, yes, use it for servicing our site. I guess that's the simple answer. Andrew, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, we're taking advantage of that existing laneway. Provides, as Rial kind of went through, like a really nice a spot to put the garage door and the loading away from the streetscape, and avoids any of the impacts that we'd have with the adjacent signalized intersection. So it's kind of a win-win to have this publicly owned laneway right adjacent to the site.
Would a future development also be able to use that laneway if they're proposing any underground parking? I think so, eh?
My understanding would be it's basically a city laneway, so it would have to go through the same application as this to permit access to it. But yeah. I don't see anything restricting that unless staff or yourself have an issue with it in the future.
No, I imagine a future developer next to you would also be using the lane.
Okay, and on that note, is the private lane 2-way traffic? Where does it go or end?
So yes, it would be 2-way. It's 6 meters wide, so that can accommodate vehicles in both directions. It starts on Richmond Road, and funnily enough, it exists today. And if you look at an ownership map, you'll see, and it also carries further south, but it's not operational as a laneway, yet it is still owned by the city as such. So what we're proposing is that it would terminate as it's shown on the plans. I mean, we can't speak to what the city does elsewhere. However, we would utilize that laneway for access to our site.
Okay, thank you. Last one in the laneway clump. Is there turning space on the west side of the laneway?
So I don't know precisely what you mean is there turning space. Our traffic consultant has run turning templates to ensure that vehicles, garbage vehicles, move in, move out, trucks are all able to access the lane comfortably, legally, as well as have sufficient space within the interior of the building to turn around and proceed outward in a forward direction.
Yeah, I would also point out, you can kind of see on the image on the screen right now, there's those little curved lines around where it says laneway. Those are actually some of the turning templates to make sure that they can get into the parking garage and the loading zone. And we also do make use of some space that is, you can't see it on this image, but it actually, there is space provided within the building envelope to help make those turn movements. So we've kind of set back the garage entrance in the loading zone from the laneway to help facilitate those movements.
Okay, thank you. Will there be surface parking?
No, we are not proposing any surface parking. All our parking is internal to the site, in the underground, both visitor and resident parking, as well as bike parking. We have proposed a lay-by area, which you can see on the plans there. Yep, thank you. So that would be a 5-minute limit for users such as delivery vehicles, people just picking up and dropping off. Quick access, we've proposed this. Bless you, Real. It has sufficient separation to the existing bus stop there at the corner of Richmond and Island Park. And as well, we have been in discussions with the councillor who notified us that this is a bike safety corridor essentially. And so through the city's review of our application, we will be looking at how we can best accommodate bike safety and short-term parking for our development.
Thank you. Can you please explain what sort of buffer you are proposing with the residential building, the first house on IADP? And I just want to note this question is from a member of the Island Park Community Association who are here tonight.
Okay, thank you for the question. We do have some rather minimal setbacks to the residential home south on Island Park. Unfortunately, with a site as tight as this, and essentially it has a key frontage on both public streets, as well as we would like to be able to provide further stepping really everywhere to provide better transition. However, we have prioritized based on feedback received our massing stepping towards the 2 public right-of-ways. And we've done our best to provide some amount of setbacks to the south as well. However, we are somewhat constrained given the small size of our site.
Thank you.
If I can add to that, there's also, in terms of creating some form of buffering, we minimize the number of units that are along that edge. The units within each floor are organized so that they front onto Island Park and Richmond and the laneway, and we minimize the number of units that are facing the that residence on the south, to the south of our property on Island Park Drive. So minimal living areas front or overlooking, minimal overlook onto that property.
Thank you. And for transparency, there was a similar question. Can you please show the side of the building that abuts the residential single-family homes that are south of the building? If you cannot, can you describe how you will mitigate the impacts? We've done that. Can you please show what the new building will look like looking northbound while on Island Park, a little north of Leighton Terrace? I don't know if that's something you have on hand, or you can take that note back and maybe prepare something.
Yep, certainly we'll take that note back.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now I think we're entering a very long traffic conversation. Can you describe the route of traffic flow for the residents?
So for this site, it actually doesn't meet the traffic generation warrants under the city's thresholds. So no actual trip generation and assessment of how those trips are going to impact the network was actually undertaken for the site. The threshold's actually around 90 units, depending on the unit type. So we were well below that. From experience in the area, and I think everyone on this call also knows how you get around here, but it's predominantly going to be Richmond to Wellington and up and down Island Park to either distribute north and south. The only access here is obviously that laneway that's right onto Richmond, so they're all going to have to access Richmond Road first and then distribute from there. So if how you would move around this neighborhood, that's probably how the new residents will move around the neighborhood as well.
Thank you. Would there be lights at the proposed laneway, or how do you plan to accommodate large volume of cars from multi-unit residents?
Andrew, you want to take that one?
Sorry, I thought I meant like building lights. Yeah, there's no lights at the laneway. It's just from a normal signal spacing standpoint. It's way too close to have two signals in that close proximity, and the trips would be fairly low at this site. Overall, if you want a question, we can follow up with and give an estimate of what the trips would be, but it's going to be, it's going to be less than 30 trips. Like, it's not even a significant total. It's not and spread out through the various time for the peak hour coming and going. So it's not a significant impact for an access perspective. So I don't think it's necessarily a large volume of cars for the multi-unit, because it is only 60 units. So it'll remain as a stop sign on the laneway, or like a typical access from any type of site or a laneway. And they would just access Richmond Road. It's a 4-lane cross section. And I can see the next, some comment farther down, but they'd be able to make a full movement there as it is currently proposed.
Okay, thank you. We have some similar questions along the same vein. So traffic is huge at this intersection. Will westbound cars be turning left into the laneway? Will cars be turning left off Island Park, Layton, to come at the building from there? Both of these would create huge bottlenecks at Richmond and Island Park in the first case, and at Byron and Island Park in the second case.
There's no access provided to Layton, so in that case, I guess they could loop around that way through the community. I don't think it's very intuitive for residents. The major in the AM, the intersection of Richmond and Island Park operates pretty well. In the PM, I think we all know there's a lot of queues in the northbound direction, and there's actually queues like at Byron, it's east and westbound queuing. That's a little bit heavier than the north-south on Island Park. So they'd even be, I can't say there's not a chance someone's going to try to cut through that, but it doesn't seem very intuitive to me. And it depends on where you're coming from. Really from the highway, you can only get onto Island Park if you're coming from the east end. So anyone coming from the west end or the south is probably going to get onto Richmond Road in Wellington from a separate corridor, and then just come along east-west along Richmond Road. Talking in generalities, because we didn't have to assess this as per the city guidelines, but it would be, yeah, I don't see much of an impact on Layton. I'll just end it there. If you want to refine the question or ask more specific, then post up another one. I can definitely dive into that.
Fair enough. I mean, my 2 cents, and Jeff knows this because I've talked about this previously, but I spent 15 years of my life living across from this intersection, and the traffic at the intersection can back up all the way to Byron. So if I lived at this building, I could see a scenario where I'm skirting through Layton to get to my laneway to enter, rather than waiting in the backup traffic. So I think it's a valid question. Just give me a second to find the other traffic.
While you're looking at
Yeah.
the next question, I'll just say that, having lived there myself for 7 years or so, and the traffic patterns, everyone avoids Island Park as much as possible. No one wants to stand in line. And you basically coming off the Queensway, you're taking Kirkwood, and then you're going to be coming eastbound and then hitting that laneway. That's the closest point. No one wants to travel westbound on Richmond Road in the evening, because that's pretty clogged up as well. So again, the closest proximity to the laneway moving eastbound is from Kirkwood. So I think logistically, it's just the natural entry point. and no left turns, avoiding left turns on Richmond at all, as much as possible.
Okay. And on a similar note, we have been told in the past that given the site's proximity to a major intersection, that it was dangerous to introduce traffic so close to the intersection. Has this proposal been reviewed by traffic engineers for safety?
Actually, one of the warrants that so had this not been close to this intersection, we probably wouldn't even had to do a TIA for this, or even look at any traffic impacts for this site, because it is well below the threshold. But because we were right at an intersection, we did have to do it. So that was analyzed, and details were provided to the city staff, and it's posted up on the website if you want to see a little bit of a breakdown of the collisions, either along Richmond Road or at the intersection. And one of the comments we received was no further assessment of the collisions or safety need to be conducted. I think the only thing we kind of have left to do is hammer out the details on that lay-by area and where the signage would go and how it's going to interact with transit. But that's the only remaining thing I have on my list with city staff to discuss.
Okay, thank you. And on the same note, how will the intersection be impacted by cars turning west out of the laneway? So have we discussed turning west yet?
So heading in the image towards the top of the image and then turning left wouldn't impact the intersection, because they'd be turning away from it. You probably, if there's any queuing in the eastbound, it would be a courtesy gap type of situation, which would be typical for any of the accesses along Richmond. And there's quite a few. So, but as for the island parking intersection, no impact.
Okay. What was the grade of the intersection when Ashcroft submitted their application after Mizrahi, and the traffic assessment report and impact with your development?
We didn't look at that, so we had a separate assessment, and we really didn't have to look at that intersection as per the scope of the TIA assessment for this. It was primarily proximity to the signal for access location and interaction with bikes were the two primary triggers for this assessment. So nothing was identified in our consultation with city staff, and we're not modifying anything at the intersection. So it'll be as is.
Thank you. And I know, Jennifer, you've emailed our office for some of this information, and thanks for your patience. I have some of it. So as soon as I have everything, I will send it your way. Okay, so now I'm moving off of traffic for a little bit. If the community's design plan calls for a maximum height of 4 stories with an exception of 6 stories under certain conditions, why is this proposal for 9 stories?
Yeah, so the CDP and the secondary plan do speak to 4 stories on this site. They do speak to greater heights at strategic locations. They don't specify maximum 6 stories, although the language is that the sites will be generally in the 4 to 6 story range. The parent official plan in this case, the official plan for the city and traditional Main Street speaks to a 9 story building height maximum along traditional main streets. And so given the prominence of the corner and the retention of the heritage asset and the gateway sort of location of the site, for those reasons, under the secondary plan, in our opinion, it's appropriate for the 9 story height to be proposed. And so that's sort of the rationale that was presented as part of the application for the official plan amendment, and is outlined further in FOTEN's planning rationale document.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that there will be some kind of public benefit from having a courtyard in front of the building. Do you actually think people want to sit out at this very busy intersection?
Well, that's a tough question to answer, to know what people would want to do. However, I think that it would be obviously visually appealing to have new landscape infrastructure installed at that corner for both residents of the building as well as residents in the adjacent neighborhoods. It could be useful for those who have pets, or who it's also directly abutting the retail space, so it's essentially a bit of a spill out. And given the shape and configuration of the existing heritage resource, we feel like it could be a pretty unique and interesting type of retail use there. So given that, we think that it could be a nice complementary space for users of that retail as well as users of the building.
I'll just
And we
add,
still hope people use it.
yeah, sorry, Aaron. I'll just add to, I mean, this corner is changing a little bit. I mean, obviously there's a lot of traffic, there's no question about that, but as part of the Mizrahi development on the northeast corner, the Rockhurst Parkette is being developed on that corner, which will create a sort of I guess another green space at the corner, another place for people to gather and recreate. So I think there's some synergy between those two public spaces on two corners of the intersection.
Okay, what will happen to the old autos building? Is this part of the project?
Sorry,
No,
are they referring
that,
to the building to the west?
Yes, that's right, Aaron.
So that isn't part of our development application. That could potentially be redeveloped by that owner. We don't have any insight or knowledge into that.
Does the northwest corner of the building come right up to the edge of the sidewalk?
So I can answer that one. No, it does not, but in the end, we're going to want to enhance that pedestrian experience. So as a result, our building will sit at the property line, but isn't parallel to the property line. And therefore, those additional setbacks are going to be an extension with a different textured paver that will extend and widen the sidewalk experience along Richmond Road. So as a result, you'll have a wider sidewalk.
Yep. Can the rooftop amenity space face Richmond rather than the neighborhood? Are there balconies on the side that faces the neighbors?
So I can discuss the amenity space and then hand it over to Riel to discuss the balconies. I wouldn't say that the rooftop amenity space faces the neighborhood. In fact, I would say that it is oriented towards Richmond and Island Park, both the interior and the exterior space. And when we do get into the site plan portion of the development process, we would design the landscape space, the amenity space rather, to focus people towards the two intersections as opposed to any overlook with respect to the neighborhood to the south as well. I think you can see on that plan there is a pretty generous setback, and given the height of the amenity, the setback from the building, and essentially like an angular plane down, I don't think there would in fact be any overlook onto the adjacent homes on Island Park.
Would you be willing to put up screening?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at that in detail and we see that there is a privacy concern, then we absolutely would be open to that, yeah.
Okay.
And Riel, do you know about the balconies?
Yeah, so happy to report there are no balconies facing south onto that. So all balconies are focused on the west, north, and east elevations. So no issues with any overlooking. The units there is a few bachelor units facing the south orientation, but they don't have balconies.
Thank you.
And as far as the rooftop, everything is focused on Richmond. I think Aaron mentioned that, but there's no, just want to make sure there's no confusion that the rooftop amenity does not face east or west. I mean, there's a portion of it that you can see on this aerial roof plan. Everything is focused along Richmond Road. The rooftop terrace as currently designed. I don't know if we have a rooftop plan in this package. Is it Paul that's driving?
It is real. We don't have it in this. I can try and find it though.
Okay. In any case, there is setback. Rooftop terraces will always be set back by the zoning bylaw 1.5 meters from the edge of the roof. In our case, we focused most of the rooftop terrace on Richmond Road and nothing to the south. Again, nothing towards the residential neighborhood to the south.
Okay, thank you. And I should have mentioned that's from Heather, the president of the Westboro Community Association. We've also had questions from Lauren with the Hampton Iona Community Association. Are any of the trees original?
No, we're not proposing to retain any of the existing trees. We did look at retaining a few along Island Park. However, we looked down the road to our construction management plan, and again, given the tight constraints of this site, we would unfortunately need that space for construction staging in the future, which is a benefit in that there'd be no need to occupy any traffic lanes as far as we can see. So that did mean that those trees could not be retained. However, we are proposing to replace them and add additional trees along Richmond Road.
Thank you.
And
no, go ahead.
And those trees along Richmond Road as well, I just want to point out, they are planted outside of our, so they'll be within city property, but that's to the advantage that they're outside of the garage footprint. So again, the problem with street trees is that there's always issues with them being planted over top of the garage and having minimal soil conditions. So in this case here, on both Richmond and Island Park, we have the ability to plant what is currently in the neighborhood, large trees that actually create what you typically want from a tree, is a tree canopy with shade and really a good street canopy for everyone to enjoy as they walk by. So anyways, it's a plus.
Okay, thank you. Given you have over 60 units, why is there so little bicycle parking? There's not even one bicycle spot per unit, and if a unit is occupied by a couple or a family, there could be several bicycles.
So I'll let Andrew discuss this in greater detail. To clarify, we don't have over 60 units. We have 60 units, and we do propose bicycle parking. We feel that bicycle parking is obviously incredibly important. Bicycle usage is important, and we do want to provide it to a level that is satisfactory and commensurate with how we feel people will end up using it. And we are not hard and fast on a specific number of spots, and we would be open to looking at more or less, I guess, depending on whatever sort of direction and feedback we get from the city.
Yeah, I'll be short and sweet. The current minimum is 30 spaces for this building, and we have 32, so we're actually above the minimum. But I can understand where the perspective of this comment.
And there's always the option of actually, which we've discussed in the past, there's 32 parking spaces, bicycle parking spaces, but those can be enhanced with the stacker model, which a lot of developers are opting for these days, and it essentially doubles your bicycle parking count. So we can easily achieve within the same space, the same volume space, a total of 64 parking spaces, bicycle parking spaces, which would exceed the 1-to-1 ratio.
The city just doesn't recognize the stackers yet as legitimate parking spaces, which is something we need to sort out, and it looks like that won't be until the next term of council.
That's great.
Okay. Is this going to be rental or condos?
So that's a good question, and unfortunately I can't give you a definitive answer at this point in time. as that's something that evolves through the lifespan of a project based on market conditions and uptake of other projects in the area. We had initially thought of this as a condo site. However, purpose-built rentals are gaining in popularity. They're becoming a little bit more economically feasible to develop. So I would say that it's moved from quite certainly condos to a little more open-ended, where we're looking at both equally.
Okay, thank you. What is the intention for use for the Heritage Gas Station cottage and service bay portions? Will it be open space, lobby?
The intention for that space is to be retail. We are proposing retail in the Heritage building as well as along Island Park on the ground floor. And we think that the garage bay portion or the service bay portion could be a very unique element for a retailer to take advantage of, especially during good weather, for spill out space, really activate that corner and hopefully create something quite compelling. The residential lobby is completely separate from that and is along Richmond Road, a little just to the west of the Heritage building.
Okay, thank you. So we're starting to get back into comments from our previous conversation. So, so Paul is asking, can you take me through the actual details, a little bit more info, please? What will they be staring at? Does anyone remember what this might be in reference to? Could this be the south side portion or the laneway? Otherwise, you might have to retype your question, Paul, so we can. No one has an idea? Okay. Paul, if you could just retype that question so that we know what you're getting at.
His previous questions were about the buffer to the south and traffic at the intersection.
Okay. We'll get him to clarify. Okay. Has there been a traffic study done for your garage entry? Okay. Sorry. Has there been a traffic study done for your garage entry, QS garage entry, 101 Richmond, the newly planned condo beside it, and Patricia Street entry, servicing all the condos in the area? Sounds like major traffic congestion. Can there be some traffic flow cooperation between yourself and Ashcroft's yet to come condos close to Byron?
The nature of access of these type of sites when they're on a roadway like this is you're going to have driveways, and it's not an atypical situation. I think anywhere in the city you go where there are either apartment buildings or retail locations, this is how everything is accessed, and we don't see anything that's untoward by this situation. As for modeling the interaction of various driveways up and down the corridor, that's not, I've never seen that actually done in any traffic assessment within the city. It's actually a very complex and expensive process to do that type of thing, and might not even get the results that you kind of want. So there's not, being that Richmond is a 4-lane road here, and it is operating as a 4-lane section. There's no parking restrictions on this side or the other side. Sorry, there are parking restrictions on this side and the other side, so you can't stop. Currently, we don't see it as a big issue for just a normal driveway that is actually existing today.
I should have included the next comment because it follows up on that. So it says, you state there's no significant impact from the additional traffic. This is not taking into consideration the cumulative effect of nearby developments. This intersection is already unsafe and overburdened. How can you say there's no effect on traffic?
So in our study, we did do the background conditions, which actually does incorporate all the known developments up and down Richmond within a set area. Plus, we also factor in background growth for, say if we We assess within 1 kilometer of this site for new developments and add that traffic onto existing conditions. Then we have a background growth, which is people beyond 1 kilometer from this site that actually impact these roadways. So in both the existing and the future background conditions, the only capacity constraints we noted at this intersection were queuing along Island Park north and southbound. Everything else met the city parameters for operations. We still do have some comments to come back from the city, but that's we can deal with those, but they haven't identified any issues with our operational analysis for the background conditions and how this is going to function in the future. So from that perspective, we weren't identified as any issues, and we don't perceive them as well. Councilor?
No, and I think there's obviously a lot of discussion about the traffic and the impact on Island Park Drive and Richmond Road, and the developers are absolutely right. I mean, this is going to generate probably 10 trips an hour at peak, which is a car every couple of minutes, which in the background of Island Park and Richmond Road is obviously very little. The larger issue is Island Park and Richmond Road and congestion in the ward, which virtually from one end to the other is a result of the fast-growing Quebec traffic that is using the bridge. We feel spillover effects of bridge crossing traffic from Hintonburg right through Westboro. The city knows that, and council is likely to approve and continue approving intensification projects despite the worsening conditions for traffic. And the city's answer and council's answer to the concerns over increasing congestion is not going to be to stop the focus on intensification. It is to continue making the investments in public transportation and active transportation. And most importantly for our ward is to continue to encourage our colleagues on the other side of the river to improve their public transportation. The fast-growing suburbs of Gatineau are poorly served by transit today, and the only relief that is really on the horizon for our ward is to get the public transit system in Gatineau better integrated, flowing better, faster, more convenient for Gatineau residents. One of the things that I would like to take a look at, and it's I'm realistic about my chances of actually being able to achieve it, are things like tolling the Champlain Bridge. Once the Gatineau Transit is better integrated with our road network, which is the discussion we're having at council in a very active way right now, I think we need to have those additional nudges to get people to start using it. As long as Gatineau continues to grow, and it is growing quickly in Aylmer and other suburbs of Gatineau, Island Park Drive and Richmond Road is going to continue to be a victim of that. It's going to continue to get more and more congested, but council is not going to stop its focus on intensification projects in the meantime. We want to see more housing built. We want to see more customers for our public transportation system for LRT. So there is a lot of discussion about traffic. I don't want to have an expectation out there that if we can demonstrate that the intersection is failing, that we can stop this development. This development, there's lots of things to disagree with and agree with, but traffic is not necessarily one of them. The site plan of how things like the lay-by work and pedestrian safety and cycling safety, as you add a new entrance here, is something that I'm very interested in continuing to talk to the community associations about as we take a look at the configuration. But I want to make sure that residents understand that increasing congestion at the corner of Richmond Road and Island Park, Byron and Island Park, Scott and Island Park, Parkdale, and Scott. You know, these are areas that are going to continue to become more and more congested, and City Council knows that. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Okay, okay, sorry. Does the lack of step back on the west side of the building exiting the laneway not concern the developer that there will be a lack of line of sight?
I'm not 100% certain what the line of sight is referring to. Perhaps they're referring to cars entering and exiting the laneway, maybe not being able to see vehicles. However, we have studied that, and that isn't the case. I don't know if Andrew has additional thoughts to that, or maybe I'm misinterpreting the question.
Yeah, there's the city's private approach. Well, this is kind of a different situation with it being a public roadway, but if we kind of considered a private approach, we're set far enough back from the curb that there's sufficient sightline to pull up and get out. I think the primary, we haven't received any comments on this, and it hasn't been a concern highlighted. We haven't highlighted as a concern either. But in general sense, when you're looking at building access, your first concern is making sure you have clear sight for pedestrians on the sidewalk. And usually with the sidewalk present, you're set back far enough to then allow the car to creep forward when it's safe to enter the sidewalk. You know, double check the road again, and then make your turning movement. So in this situation, we had enough of a setback from the building with the property line that we didn't see a sightline concern, and so far concurrence from city staff as well.
Okay. I think just a general comment for your consideration. If everyone supposedly avoids Island Park, why is there gridlock in front of my house every night between 3:30 and 7 p.m. on weeknights and during many periods on the weekend? If your visitor parking is insufficient, Leighton Terrace would be mostly adversely affected. If residents of Leighton Terrace seek to ban overnight parking on their street or only allow paid parking overnight, will your company be supportive? Or how will your company support? I'm not sure.
From Trinity's perspective, this is far outside of our development application, so it isn't something that is on our radar with respect to this application. And obviously, we will do our best to mitigate as much as possible all traffic impacts that do arise from, you know, the proposed 60 units here. Sorry, Councillor.
You know, the parking regulations on Leighton are in the hands of the residents who live on Leighton. If they want to change the parking regulations on their street, the same petition process is open to them as to residents on other streets. If they propose a change to the city and there's no safety reason not to proceed with it, then the city would prepare a petition that, if it got 2/3 concurrence, would become the new parking regulation. So they're entirely masters and mistresses of the parking on their street. Trinity's, or the developer in this case, what they wanted on Leighton would be irrelevant to the city.
And we do meet the visitor parking requirements for the site, so it's not insufficient.
I do want to warn, I mean, we have a huge issue with, or I hear a ton of feedback from the Q West residents, the Ashcroft residents. You know, they feel the visitor parking that's available around is insufficient. Recently, actually, we tried to make that left-hand turn onto Leighton westbound a little bit easier by changing some of the parking, and that was a complete sorry, I'll use the polite word, that was a challenging discussion, and so I'm having to reverse course on a bunch of changes that we made. You know, the residents of this building should probably, be told when they move in that the parking in this neighborhood is extremely challenging. Certainly at a 0.5 ratio, I have no doubt that you'll be able to fill the units with people who don't require a parking space. But it's it's going to be important that they understand that they're not going to be able to find street parking around for their vehicles. It's more and more challenging all the time, and the visitor parking situation could be challenging as well. And when you're looking at your ratios, I probably would over provision visitor parking and under provision the resident parking.
Okay, that's a good point. We can look at that.
Okay, thank you. 2 tree questions. I'll read them both. Can you please describe the trees to be planted on Richmond and Island Park? Are they full trees or Ashcroft sticks or something in between? And the second question is, the trees along the Ashcroft buildings have done very poorly since they were planted, and the trees in front of the Superstore have not done well. What will you do differently to make sure that your trees actually do well, unlike many of the other street trees?
Well, I don't know the exact species of tree off the top of my head that we are proposing to plant. However, in concert with our landscape architect, we and our arborist, we've discussed and looked at the types of trees that survive best in these urban conditions. As Rael noted, we will have a better chance of survivability here because of the available soil depth. And obviously, if a tree is not doing well, we will look to replace it with a healthy tree if it's dying immediately, because obviously it's in the best interests of the community, and we want to see the landscape surrounding our site succeed and do well into the future.
Thank you. How many feet is the southeast corner from the Island Park sidewalk?
Rael, do you know?
Yeah, so essentially, if you we're approximately just a little over 5.5 meters from the curb. If you look at the sidewalk, the city sidewalk regulations, I think we're at 1.8 meters, if not a little bit wider in this case here. So, but the building itself from the street curb is 5.5 meters. So we're building out that front space to be a sidewalk experience. So that's what you're dealing with in terms of a street width or a sidewalk width.
Is that the same though, Rail, on the Island Park?
Oh, sorry. Was the question related to Island Park or Richmond? My apologies.
Island Park, on the southeast corner at Island Park. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so again, it's the building edge, that corner to the sidewalk. We're looking at a total of 4 meters.
Okay. Will the OC Transpo stop on Richmond be retained? Buses may block the laneway briefly.
The bus stops probably a little farther closer to the intersection. This is that's probably another item that we haven't got a final word on, whether the stop will remain where it is or will shift to the other side of the intersection. It's really going to come down to how OC Transpo wants to operate it. And so this stop is actually currently on the near side. So OC Transpo currently likes to have them on the far side. So you get through the intersection and then stop. So we'll have to see what their feedback is on the stop and whether they ask for it to move or stay in the same spot and just have some landscaping around it to help enhance it. So we'll get those comments shortly.
Thank you. Yeah, so for those who are new to this process, it's on public circulation as well as technical circulation right now. So after the commenting period for both the public and the city departments, JC takes all those comments, kind of boils them down, and then gives comments back to the applicant. So things like, you know, traffic and OC transpo, they'll all be weighing in on the application, and we may see modifications as a result. Okay. Will the reconstruction of the garage door portion use original materials?
So we will seek to use as many of the original materials as possible in reconstructing the garage portion. Unfortunately, many of the components are quite deteriorated from a structural standpoint. The building is taking water damage, and just not being serviced and used on a regular basis is not good for the longevity of the building. So yes, it is our intention to use as many of the original materials as possible, and when not possible, to use new materials that seek to replicate the original condition as closely as possible.
And I assume anything you guys do will have to be approved by the Heritage Department, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an image of your slide? Okay. Do you have an image of your slide 3 image panned out to show an aerial view of your building in relation to the house immediately south on Island Park Drive?
I think this is similar to the question earlier about what it looks like when you're driving north on Island Park Drive. We'll have to go back. I don't believe we have an image specific to that in our presentation.
Yeah, I don't have that rendering in our package, so we'll have to get that over to Jennifer.
Okay, thank you. Can you expand on how you imagine the lay-by working? I am thinking about drop-off and pickup of residents/visitors who require a bit more time, walkers, wheelchairs, etc. And that stopping on the roadway may be an issue for traffic flow. Do you imagine the laneway will be used for this purpose as well?
So I think you have the right idea there about the it could be like Uber Eats or a drop off like that, or it could be paratransport that drops off there, and these will try not to block the laneway or the transit stops. So that's what we're kind of envisioning for this. Given that there's no surface parking, it doesn't really make sense on this site. We don't really have a surface area to provide that internal to the site. So that's why our concept for this street lay-by is what we're proposing. For traffic flow, just to the west of here, there is on-street parking permitted on both sides of the road. So it's not considered introducing just a stop car in the middle of a free flow lane. This curbside lane is typically used as parking to the west and to the east of this site. So it usually only opens up as a full lane for either transit stops or for to assist in intersection capacity, turning right, or get around a left turn vehicle. So we don't envision it impacting the intersection operations. It's going to be signed so it doesn't go back into the laneway or interfere with the transit stop. But it is that short-term drop-off that can't get a paratransport or get someone into the underground garage. So that's our intention for this.
Can I ask you, is that something the city is asking for? Are you proposing it?
This was actually our proposition.
Okay. No, it's. I don't know if in our meetings I've raised it, but I think we've talked about. I'm concerned about cyclists who are going through there. There are more discussions on this to follow, I'm sure. I'm curious to hear what the city thinks.
Yeah, we did get a comment about some future vision of Richmond Road, but it was kind of vague. So I'm looking forward to those comments as well to see what we can piece together for this spot.
I think I'll be addressing that in a few minutes.
Okay. Who will clear the snow from the laneway, the city or the property owner?
So we had proposed to have a heated laneway or heated driveway, so that snow clearing won't be an issue. There wasn't really space, again, given the constrained site dynamics, for snow to be pushed and stored on site. So for that reason, our proposal is to provide heating so that the snow melts.
But I don't
You
think the
maintain.
heating. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Fiona.
I was just gonna say, I don't think the heating's on the laneway itself, is it?
We have noted that on our plans. However, obviously something, again, that we will have to negotiate with the city as we move forward.
I assume the legal mechanisms are in place to ensure that if you install heating in the public laneway, that's your liability in perpetuity.
Yep. There would have to be a legal component to this, definitely. And again, it is something that once we get our response comments, we will circle back on and decide whether it's something we want to move forward with.
Thanks.
How will you manage moving trucks for move-in?
Well, as we discussed previously, the turning templates were done to ensure that moving trucks are able to maneuver within the laneway comfortably, and they are able to access the internal area of the building, which is not shown on this roof plan. However, there is internal loading, move-in, and garbage. So there is a particular spot for moving trucks to park that is adjacent to the elevators and everything, so that residents can move in and out.
Thank you. Paul is back responding to clarifying his question from earlier. So the residential building next door, what will neighbors see? So by next door, I mean the building to the west, and what they will see from there.
I don't think that's residential, though. That's the car dealership, so he might be, again, referring to the park.
Yeah, I mean, answer however you think it is.
Well, the car dealership will see the laneway in the side of our building, as was previously shown in some renderings, and the folks to the south on Island Park, again, we will get a rendering that is more specific to that made available.
Okay.
What I'm going to suggest is a number of residents are probably really interested. So if you're standing in the front yard of the house that is immediately to the south of you, and you look up, what are you seeing? Because I think that house is challenging for you to try to achieve the building that you've described. It's when you are in that house and you look up, you're going to see windows, right? It's a 9-story building that goes pretty much straight up from almost the property line.
Riel, do you know what level the windows would start at on that south side?
Yeah, so the good thing at the ground level, so we have a 6-meter ground level in order to basically internalize all of the retail, as well as the move in, move out, and the parking ramp. And the parking ramp is located along the south property line. So there are no windows for the first 6 meters. It's just a flat stone wall. And then the second level would be at that 6-meter height where the windows would begin.
And what is the setback on that south property line there? Do you know, Paul?
We have 1.8 meters.
Okay.
Okay. Will you be posting proposed interior floor plans that show the configuration of the ground floor and apartment levels, circulation space, balconies, etc., or does this follow at a later stage?
Our submission documents, the architecture plans, do include a ground floor plan that shows the demising of the space, as well as demising of residential levels above. So that is available on the city's website, I believe.
Okay,
Should be
very
available
short.
in the DevApps package.
Yeah, very shortly I'll put the link in the chat for those who haven't had a chance to check it out yet. Can Andrew Hart please provide a copy of his traffic report to the community associations?
So that's also it's on the DevOps as well, so free to download. And when that link's posted, you can go to it right away.
I will provide a direct link to that very shortly as well. Okay, question for Jeff Leeper. How do we address issues with this intersection independent of this particular development? The angle at which people make a left turn from Richmond Road onto Island Park, the speed at which people go through the intersection to avoid getting stranded mid-intersection, and the proximity of the sidewalk to the street along that strip along Island Park near the Mizrahi site.
And it's there's no immediate quick fix that I can point to, but what I will say is that I imagine that many on the call this evening saw the headlines around the 29 intersections that need safety improvements. Richmond Road and Island Park Drive is one of those, and you can see, and if you email me, I'll send you the direct PDF. But there is a reconfiguration that has been conceptualized by city planners. The difficulty now is who's going to pay for it. So the mayor and I have written to the NCC asking for their help to get this intersection done. If and when Richmond Road is rebuilt through here, and I don't think that's going to be for quite some time because I think it was recently done. But even if Island Park gets rebuilt through this corridor, that would give us the opportunity to immediately go in and do that. Right now, the intersection is one of 29 that the city has identified for safety improvements with a concept plan that I can send you if you write to me. And the question is how it's going to be funded. I'm going to take over Fiona's role for a second here. If your project is approved, when will construction begin and how long will it take to build this building?
So presuming we get our official plan amendment and rezoning approval, we would still have to then file our site plan application, which, you know, let's just estimate at about a year perhaps. And then you need to secure building permits for construction to start. So it's a little bit of time still before construction would begin. And with respect to actual construction, that's not my specialty. However, I would imagine it would be somewhere in the realm of maybe 24 to 36 months.
Okay, thank you. Visitors such as family and friends should not be bullied into public transit. I'll take that as a comment. You know, there are a lot of different lifestyles that people live. And, you know, this is a bigger discussion that the city is having right now as part of the transportation master plan is how are people going to get from point A to point B? Right across North America, there are evolving approaches to how to accomplish that, but I'll take note of the comment. Would you be blasting to get 2 levels underground?
So that would be something we would have to look more in depth at with a geotechnical study to understand what the soil composition is below our site, where the bedrock lies. To properly answer that, I wouldn't want to say yes or no and misspeak at this point. 2 levels isn't particularly deep, but again, I don't know where bedrock lies here.
Yeah, I mean, we know bedrock changes drastically over the space of just a few meters, but kitty corner to you at the Mizrahi site, you know, they were blasting fairly close to the surface, and I'm going to guess that you're going to find similar geotech there. When would you have that geotech done?
Well, we'd certainly have it done during site plan.
And I think Fiona may be back. I see that she's
I am back. Thank you.
posting links.
Yeah, so in the chat, hopefully everyone can see, so there's 2 applications that are before us. One is the official plan amendment, so that's the first link. The second is the zoning bylaw amendment application package. That's the second link. And then I've extracted the transportation impact study that's part of the zoning bylaw amendment application. So all those links are there for you. So basically, City Council knows that it's creating a huge problem for residents and just doesn't care. We'll continue to dream that unbuilt public transit in Quebec will someday address the problem. Sad, I expected better from our council. Do you want to respond?
Yeah, no, fair comment. Again, you know, this isn't a direction that comes from one councillor. The transportation master plan is something that gets worked on. We're working on it right now. There's, you know, a large degree of consensus on the part of City Council about the directions of that. And again, it's not just one city. You know, these are approaches that are being adopted across North America as we struggle with trying to reverse the damage to our financial sustainability and our environmental sustainability, the increasing crisis we have in cities around the affordability of housing, because we have for 50 years prioritized building our neighborhoods around cars. And, you know, right across North America, progressive jurisdictions are making those transformations. Our neighborhood, our ward, Kitchissippi, is going to be a more difficult one to get around by car. It's going to take longer to get to from point A to point B. The days when you could hop in the car and find a parking space in front of Saslow's, jump in, grab a roast, and then drive a couple blocks back home, you know, those are long gone. And you know, it's not just me. It is the result of choices that are made for other benefits by progressive jurisdictions right around North America. I'll leave it there, and I'm more than happy to take this offline and have a conversation. And the opportunity is really today to start talking about the transportation master plan and weigh in with how you want people to get from point A to point B.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna touch in with everyone. So it's almost 8:30. It's 8:28. We have I think 6 more questions in the queue. So let's try to get through those, but we'll have a hard cutoff of 8:45. Should we be concerned about cars turning right out of the laneway and wanting to turn left north on Island Park Drive? Potentially with risky maneuvers, no? Especially if you add in the bus stop.
I don't consider it a risky maneuver. The way you would access this on Richmond Road is you'd almost be turning right into that lane. Once there was a gap, start make your left turn. So it would be kind of all done in one movement, not like a turn and then a quick lane change scenario that might be under consideration here in this comment. So no, it wasn't considered risky or need any further consideration than a typical site access maneuver.
Thank you. These are things, though, comments that you should be sending to JC in our office as part of like your official feedback as well. If the building does become a condo, what long-term responsibility will Trinity have to the site in respect of such things? Landscaping, retail tenants, etc.
So with respect to landscaping, on-site landscaping would be the responsibility of the condo corporation, and off-site landscaping would be the responsibility of the city. With respect to retail, that would be something that, presuming Trinity continues to manage, we would sign leases, manage tenants, and ensure the spaces are leased out and maintained in good working order. However, if it is condo and the units are sold, then any long-term obligations with respect to maintenance would be the responsibility of the condo corporation.
Thank you. You are asking for 7 zoning exceptions. What's the point of zoning? This is a question for Jeff. You're muted. Sorry, Jeff, you're muted.
It's a good question, and they're not asking for a 20-story tower because they know they wouldn't get one. They are working around the margins of a secondary plan that was developed with fairly major changes made to the official plan and to the provincial policy statement since those were made. Planning is actually very elegant. It all rolls up. The zoning has to be compliant with the official plan, which has to be compliant with the provincial policy statement. They're playing around in the margins of what they think they can get from council on the basis of our most recent official plan. We have a secondary plan for the neighborhood that is, it's a decade or so old now. Planning thinking has evolved, and they will be eyeing a potential rejection by council, and what is the case that they can make to the local planning appeal tribunal. The local planning appeal tribunal is going to take a look if this were to get challenged, if council makes a decision and it gets challenged, whether we reject the proposal and then the developer challenges it, or we approve the proposal and then residents challenge it. The LPAT is going to take a look and say, what is your official plan? And the developer has a right to expect that council will approve zoning that is in line with the official plan. And that's fundamentally what the discussion is here today, is does a 9-story building at this location meet with the city's official plan? And they have an expectation that if it does, and they're making their argument for it, that council will approve it. And zoning is never written in stone. 15, we're going to do a bunch of new infill rules, and we've done new R4 zoning. We've done a lot of work in the past couple of years to try to bring our zoning into compliance with the official plan. And all that work that we're doing today is probably going to be, again, starting to get nibbled at and challenged by developers 15 and 20 years from now, as planning continues, as planning thinking continues to evolve. They're not looking for a 20-story tower because they know they wouldn't get it. They're not looking for a 15-story tower because they know they wouldn't get it. They're playing in the margins of the changes to the official plan as it relates to the zoning on this site. I'm always happy to have a longer conversation. I could go on for hours, but I am more than happy to have a longer conversation if you want to reach out.
Thank you. How will the building garbage removal and recycling be performed? Those waste trucks are large and need lots of room.
So I feel like this is something we touched on previously, wherein our traffic consultant did look at turning templates to ensure that all vehicles that were intended to be used on the site, including garbage vehicles, could function appropriately, did have the appropriate space and clearances to perform the requisite turnaround and drive into the site and out of the site in a safe manner.
Thanks. And there's a similar question as well. I'll just read it out just for the sake of it. What if there were a few moving trucks and waste disposal? Can all of the vehicles be maneuvered on the laneway? Can there be a circle throughway after entering your laneway? Okay. To where will the melted snow from the laneway flow? On a cold day, as the melted snow flows to the sidewalk or street, could it freeze before it gets to the sewer, particularly if the street hasn't been plowed yet and everything freezes? Will there be sewer grates in the laneway so that the melt doesn't leave the property?
So as part of our development application, we retained a civil engineering firm to look at stormwater management on site and servicing capacity in the area. So we would grade the site such that flows would be retained. We do have a stormwater retention tank that ensures that water doesn't rush out to the city infrastructure at a pace that it can't handle. So we would retain water and release it at a steady pace. So water wouldn't be flowing off the site uncontrolled. It would all be planned, managed, and flows would be controlled.
Okay, thank you. And the last question that I have for tonight, there's a burden on density's impact on schools. Nepean High School is 130% enrollment. The school has exceeded its impervious usage. Why is so much density being added when the infrastructure services, schools, have not been planned to accommodate said infrastructure, intensification? Sorry.
Paul?
Sorry, it's a bit of a tough question to answer. I mean, schools are planned by the school board, and they base their plans for expansion or additions to schools on trends, obviously on population trends. Unfortunately, it's usually reactionary more than it is proactive. So they will react to changes in density to increase capacity or redistribute students between other schools, as we've seen in certain areas, other interurban areas. And so that's school board planning is a whole other, department. It's not really a city department. It's a whole other game that the school boards are in charge of, and they review and comment on applications, and so they're aware of all development that is working its way through the city's review system, and they are largely reacting to that.
If I can, I mean, as I conceive of this building, if it's allowed to move forward, this is going to be fairly high-end, whether it's rental or whether it's condo. I cannot imagine that the corner of Richmond Road and Island Park Drive is going to be sort of mid-level housing, right? It's going to be fairly high-end, and the number of teenagers who are likely to live in the building could probably be counted on maybe a couple of hands. That's, and we need more family housing in the neighborhood, but not every building is going to accommodate family housing. The real pressure for us in Kitchissippi is the infill, right? Which is still the driving force behind population growth in our ward. Is, we see the singles come down and the semis go up, or even denser semis with the apartments in them. The new development throws off school development charges, right? I see. Yeah. So Paul's nodding.
Yes.
So,
sorry. Yes, it would.
Yeah, so as we grow, the school board takes advantage of money for growth, and then it allocates that according to where it sees the growth. We're going to see a new school in what we're calling Gladstone Village, the new OCH community that's at the corner of Gladstone and Loretta, just on the other side of the tracks. There's going to be a big new population there. The school age population has grown, and I believe it's the English Catholic Board or the French Catholic Board is going to build a new school there. They see the population need. It's a bit of chicken and egg, but the density drives the school board decisions, and they are reactive based on what they're seeing in terms of the trends. I'll leave it there.
Okay, so that's the last question. There's nothing else in the queue. So that's it. Jeff, do you want to provide some wrapping up words?
No, I'll just say, I mean, I'm still not certain what my approach to this particular building is going to be. There are some obvious, if it moves ahead in the form in which it is currently proposed, I think there are some really important site plan issues that have to be addressed. The lay-by and just taking that second look at the safety of in and out traffic, low as it might be, from the public laneway onto Richmond Road is a concern. The thing tonight's session is an opportunity to hear from the developer, find out more about the plans, ask questions, and now the real work begins of both residents and myself determining what we want to change about this proposal, what we support, what we don't, and I'm looking forward to working with the community associations and directly with residents as well, to see how this might evolve before it finally comes to a planning committee vote. So this is not your only opportunity to provide feedback. The really important feedback is what you start providing by email now, to me and to the city planners on the file. Jean-Charles, do you have any idea sort of what the time frame is for a planning approval on this one? I'm assuming, what are we now? We're December. Is it a December planning committee meeting of 2021? More aggressive? July?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would be pushed that far out for OPA and zoning, but I mean, the deadline for commenting on this initial circulation period is December 28th, and depending on the outcome and of these comments received, then we'll be in a better position to know if we are, when we'll be in a position to bring it forward to planning committee and at that point.
Okay, and throughout the next several months, my job is to receive feedback and continue advocating with the developer and with the city for changes. So the deadline for comment to the city may be December 28th, but I am more than happy to continue working with folks over the next couple of months. And then just for those who may not be familiar with planning processes, Jean-Charles will he will ultimately end up writing a report probably sometime early next summer is my guess, that either recommends approval of this building to the planning committee of city council or not. It's very unlikely that anything that receives a recommendation to reject would actually move forward. Generally, the developer will work with the city until they get to the point where they can get a approval recommendation that will be voted on by the planning committee of city council and then by city council itself, and then there is the potential for appeals to the local planning appeals tribunal. Thanks, Fiona.
Okay, thank you. There are a few thank yous in the chat or in the Q&A. Thank you everyone for attending, and this will be on YouTube by Friday if you want to pass it along to anyone else. Oh, sorry, one last question probably for JC. Given that the public meeting didn't happen until today, isn't December 28th a pretty short date given that it'll be in the middle of the holiday period? Who in the planning department will be working on this between December 28th and 30th?
I will. Well, in all honesty, I mean, like Jeff said, the December 28th date is a date that's 28 days after the date that we put it out in circulation. I will be receiving comments after that date, so by all means, keep sending me those comments. Just the more you wait, the more, the earlier you send me your comments, the easier it is for me to send it off to the applicants for them to address right away. And just another side note, tonight's community meeting is not a statutory meeting under the Planning Act. That is something that the councillor decided to hold, and is not, or the Planning Act doesn't see it as part of the circulation process. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any closing comments? Nope. Okay. Thank you, councillor. Thank you, applicant. Thank you, residents. I'm done with my thank yous.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a great evening. Thanks, Fiona. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.